Today on the Dad the Best I Can show.
So one day when he was at this bar in Sacramento in a hotel, he ran into Charles Barkley, his favorite celebrity. He really loved basketball, and so my dad went up and he asked for a photo. My dad must have said something to Charles that just got him really interested. They basically just started talking for hours, and eventually it led to them going to dinner together.
Hey now. Welcome to the Dad the Best I Can show. My name is Rob Roseman. Who wants to be a millionaire legend? Chicago futures trader? Vegas poker pro? Now I'm a dad to 3 kids, ages 6, 4, and 1. Phew! Wears me out just thinking about it. Each week we're bringing on dads like you to tell us your stories, your tips and tricks to help all of us make it through dad life. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now let's get on with the show. All right. Welcome to the Dad the Best I Can show. Today we have a very special episode that I feel truly honored to be a part of and share with you guys. We are lucky to be joined by Shirley Wang. Shirley is a writer and radio journalist in Iowa City. And she wrote a really touching story about her dad, Lin Wang, who passed away last year, and the unlikely friendship he shared with NBA superstar Charles Barkley. Yes, you heard that right, the Charles Barkley. Some of you guys may have heard this story. Charles talked about it on Jimmy Kimmel, and it's kind of gone viral, but I'm sure a lot of you have not heard it. So I'm really excited and honored to have Shirley on today to share it with you guys. Thank you for being here, Shirley.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, I have to admit, I stumbled upon this piece that you wrote about your dad, and it made me tear up. It made me laugh. It made me smile. And I really felt like I knew you and your dad after reading it. So it had all of those effects. Can you tell us a little bit about your father, for those of you that haven't heard the story?
Yeah, so my dad, he grew up in China, moved to the US when he was 28, and he was a really funny guy. He told a lot of stories. He loved to go to dinner parties and just kind of leave the table in laughter. And basically, he was very outgoing. And so one day when he was at this bar in Sacramento in a hotel, he ran into Charles Barkley, his favorite celebrity. He really loved basketball, and so my dad went up and he asked for a photo. My dad must have said something to Charles that just got him really interested. They basically just started talking for hours, and eventually it led to them going to dinner together. And then they saw each other the next night and the next night again, just by chance in the same bar, and they exchanged numbers. And Charles was kind of like, if you're ever in these cities, Phoenix, New York, or Atlanta, you can hang out with me. And so my dad did just that. They developed a really funny friendship, just like this, my dad's like a cat litter scientist from Iowa, just like super regular dad. I mean, I loved him so much, and he was my dad. And
Yeah. So like any dad telling your kid a story, did you not believe your dad? And I'm sure he did plenty of dad things where he embarrassed you with stories, or just like when your dad tells you he met Charles Barkley, are you like, yeah, right? I think you in your story you showed a screenshot of his phone, and it's hilarious. Tell us about like how you came to believe this story.
oh yeah, I mean, I did not, well, because my dad would come home with all these selfies, right, of him and Charles together. And I would just say, "Oh, cool, Dad. Like, I sort of know who Charles Barkley is. Not really. My friends tell me he's a big deal, but I never follow basketball." But I kind of thought, why would this guy, if he's super famous, why would he be friends with my dad? So I kind of thought my dad was just this like fangirl entourage person, following Charles around. And um, yeah, but when my dad got sick, things really changed. Their friendship changed a lot, and I don't know if I should spoil what happened. Should I tell what happened or? Do you want me to listen to it?
All right, we're going to play a clip here from Shirley Wong on the Only a Game podcast from WBUR. Here's Shirley.
Charles Barkley's friends couldn't quite place this mystery guest. He wasn't a basketball player, he wasn't a sports figure, and he wasn't from Barkley's hometown. Here's what I can tell you about him. He wore striped red polo shirts, tucked into khaki shorts, and got really excited about 2-for-1 deals. He was a commuter. He worked as a cat litter scientist in Muscatine, Iowa. In short, he was everyone's suburban dad. More specifically, he was my dad.
It was obviously a very difficult time.
That's Charles Barkley.
And the next thing I know, he shows up. Everybody's like, who's the Asian dude over there? And I just started laughing. I said, that's my boy Lin. They're like, how do you know him? I said, it's a long story.
A long story that started 4 years ago.
He has a big personality.
That's my dad, Lin Wang. I actually recorded this interview with him in 2017. He told me he knew about Charles Barkley long before he met him.
Well, yeah, he's a top 50 players in the history of the NBA. For many years, he was the number 2 guy, right after Michael Jordan.
Whenever we attended dinner parties, my dad would talk about his friend Charles Barkley. The first time my dad told the story, I didn't pretend to know who this person was. Basketball has never been my thing. Like a good millennial, I Googled Charles Barkley. He seemed pretty famous, and definitely not like anyone who would be friends with my dad. About 2 years ago, I asked my dad if I could see their texts. They were mostly messages from my dad that ended with an excessive number of exclamation points. In one of the texts, in which my dad calls Barkley brother, my dad wrote, "Brother, you are so popular! Exclamation point, exclamation point. Watching your Capital One commercials in March Madness every year is almost like eating turkeys in Thanksgiving! Exclamation point, exclamation point. It has become a must-do thing in March! Exclamation point. Good for you! Exclamation point, exclamation point." I told my dad the conversation seemed pretty one-sided and handed the phone back. As I talked about the relationship with more and more people, I began to think that either my dad was one of the luckiest basketball fans ever, or this whole thing was an elaborate joke, a dinner for schmucks type situation. But no, the friendship was real.
It was like one of the most random things.
Yeah, I was on business trip and stayed in one of the hotels and was working in the lobby, and I saw Charles Barkley.
I was in Sacramento speaking at a charity event.
So I just went to say hi. I don't want to take a picture with him.
I was just sitting at the bar, and me and your dad were the only 2 people in there, and we just sit down and started talking.
He's a super nice guy.
And before we knew it, we looked at each other like, yo, man, I'm hungry. And we said, well, let's go to dinner. It turned into a 2-hour dinner. And then we actually went back to the bar and just sit there and talk for another couple hours. And the rest is history.
My dad and Barkley saw each other again in the bar the next night, and the night after that. At the end of the third night,
Certainly I told him I had a good time talking with him, hanging out with him. He said the same thing to me. And he left the phone number. He said, whenever you're in Atlanta, New York City, or Phoenix, check out with me. If I'm in town, we'll hang out, have a good time.
over the next few years, whenever my dad was in those cities, he would text Barkley and they would hang out.
I mean, it's just a fun time. I mean, like when he came to Atlanta and came to the show and things, my friends, Shaq, Ernie, Kennedy, they enjoyed just meeting him.
They got dinner together.
I think I had Thai basil noodle. It was pretty good. I had right inside the office.
Spent time on the set of Inside the NBA.
He likes to clean. There's several big can of cleaning wipes right on his desk. Every time he sit down, he clean his desk.
Watched basketball games.
And Iowa lost into Maryland that day.
I'm pretty sure they did some partying too, but that I don't know much about.
Your dad is one of the happiest people I've ever met in my life. I mean, I'm not just saying it. I mean, think about it. It's fun to be with your friends. You know, because like I don't have that many friends that I want to be around. To be honest with you, I mean, you know a lot of people, but when you go spend time with your friends, it's a whole different animal.
Back home, my dad's coworkers would tease him about Barkley and ask him about the story all the time. My dad didn't mind that they didn't believe him. He even made a slideshow of photos of him and Barkley together for our community's Chinese New Year celebration. Totally irrelevant to the holiday. Why do you think, like, out of all the people that he's interacted with, that you became friends with him? Like, what is it about you and him that made that last?
I think we had a good conversation. We agree with each other a lot of point of views. You know, he grown up in the 70s in Alabama. His father left him and his mother when he was little. He grew up with grandma and mother, and the grandma and mother cleaned up house for somebody else to make a living. Tough life for him. But, you know, he's well respected professionally. You know, that's his story.
My dad moved to Iowa from China in the 90s. He felt that Barkley and him had similar experiences.
So to me, as an Asian in the U.S., I felt as long as I do a good job, people will respect me.
Barkley and my dad both worked hard. So hard they believed that the color of their skin didn't matter. In Chinese, we'd say that dad sometimes would 胡说八道. That meant that sometimes he was known for spewing rubbish. I know that basketball fans might say Barkley often does the same.
Remembering the mother of Charles Barkley. Today, folks in Leeds said goodbye to Charcy Glenn. She died at her home this week.
When my dad heard on the news that Barkley's mother had passed away, my dad looked up the funeral details, hopped on a plane to Leeds, Alabama.
It ain't easy to get to those places. I'm from a very small town.
And my dad showed up for his friend. Afterwards, he went to dinner with Barkley and his family.
For your dad to take the time to come to the funeral meant a great deal to me.
Then, in May 2016, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. He had tumors in his heart. I took that fall off from school. My dad and I watched mobster movies together, action movies, kung fu movies. When the credits rolled, we'd flip to a basketball game. Just me and him, watching a lot of TV in our living room. Days passed by.
Whale of a playoff game in Oklahoma City tonight, and the Thunder even the series in the Western Conference semis with San Antonio.
Then months.
From the set of Saturday Night Live in New York City, it's Inside the NBA. Hello, with Charles Barkley.
Then it was 2 years.
And he never told you that he was sick, correct?
No, because I called him and got mad at him when I found out. I was like, dude, we're friends. You can tell me. You're not bothering me. You know me well enough. If you were bothering me, I would tell you were bothering me.
What Barkley didn't know was that my dad watched him almost every night on TNT. And while he rested and healed, my dad was laughing along with Barkley. He kept my dad company.
I think the Cavs bench is underrated.
June 2018, NBA Finals. Golden State Warriors versus Cleveland Cavaliers. My dad was staying in palliative care at the hospital. He loved the Warriors. I visited and read him sports highlights. He didn't get to watch J.R. Smith's late mistake in Game 1 live when Smith forgot the score. I tried to get him to laugh about Smith dribbling away from the hoop because he thought his team was ahead. But it was a Sunday afternoon, and my dad was tired. The summer light filled his room, then the day faded, and dusk began to enter. After it was all over, I went through my dad's phone and texted all his friends. I wrote, "Hi, this is Shirley. My dad just passed away." The funeral was the day after the NBA Finals. My dad's favorite team, the Golden State Warriors, had won the night before. The funeral was set near the outskirts of Iowa City in a house by the woods. I was talking to my childhood friend when she suddenly looked stunned. I turned to look behind me, and standing there, drenched in sweat from the Iowa summer, Towering over everyone in the room at 6 feet 6 inches tall was Charles Barkley.
I had not met anybody in your family. I didn't know anybody there.
But we all knew you.
Everyone watched, astonished as this man we only knew from TV, this worldwide celebrity, walked down the aisle, looked at us, and sighed. Later, after it all, I texted Barkley and asked him, "Why my dad? Why did he matter so much to you?" And recently, I called him up and asked, "What did you even have to talk about?"
Well, I think, first of all, clearly he was a fan.
Right, big time.
But I think the main thing we talked about was you and your brother.
What did you guys talk about? What did he say?
Well, I think it was more that he was proud. And because I got a daughter too. I'm just really, really proud of her because I think she's a good person. And your dad was so proud of you and your brother. And we just talked about, because listen, as an adult, and you too young to understand this now, man, all you want is your kids to be happy. That's what you work for, to give your kids everything in life.
The more Charles Barkley and I talked, I realized just how close he and my dad were. Barkley knew so much about me and my life, even though this is the first time he and I had ever talked.
It gives me great memories and great joy to know that I was a friend of his. Just hearing about him at the funeral, what he had accomplished and what he was trying to help other people accomplish, just made me even. I wish he bragged more about himself.
So let me get this straight. You were impressed by him.
Yeah.
At the funeral, people shared memories of my dad and made me realize that, for example, he was not just a cat litter chemist, but an industry-changing scientist with a PhD, and not just an immigrant, but someone who reached out to Chinese newcomers, and not just a thoughtful guy, but someone people trusted for advice. I realized that even after he passed away, I would continue to learn things about my dad.
Hey, listen, you stay in touch. Please tell your mom I said hello. Give her a big kiss. Tell your brother I said hello. And listen, just keep doing you. It's your time now. Don't forget that.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the most important thing. Your dad prepared you to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
He prepared you for that.
All right.
I was blessed to know him and know you too.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome, baby. You take it easy here.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
I know how much his friendship with Charles Barkley meant to my dad. It was not just a relationship with a celebrity. It shed light on the possibilities of this world. A world where someone like him could just say something cool, something charming, and befriend someone like Charles Barkley. I'm so glad that now I get to share my dad's #1 dinner party story.
You know, that's what really struck me about your piece is, first of all, how awesome it is that you're paying tribute to your dad. And I really think, I wanted to say to you how proud he would be, that you're putting yourself out there and sharing his story. And I think it's really important for other people that have lost parents or siblings or friends or anything that, to kind of have that ability to, grieve and connect and things like that. So I just wanted to commend you for, first of all, writing a great piece, but really sharing it with the world.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's been really great to hear from other classmates and different acquaintances who, I never knew had lost someone at a very young age when we don't have all these different skills or like the emotional capacity to deal with something this heavy. And I would say I've always written and it's always been very cathartic for me. So it's a lot of this, personal processing that I do out in the open. But I would say that grieving is it's such a confusing experience, and I don't think I've mastered it at all. But I am learning how to deal with it. And I would say that, hearing from other people about how my dad would have been proud of me, or that I'm brave for putting this story out there is really comforting. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I mean, just earlier you said that your dad was bold and fearless and would go up to people. So it seems like maybe even if you didn't know that or don't take it to his extreme, you've got some of those qualities in there too. And yeah, I'm sure it is mixed emotions, like getting all the attention for this, but the fact that you are using it, for good and to tell his story. And, even, on a podcast like this, part of the reason I created it is to help other dads kind of leave a little bit of digital audio legacy for their kids and their families. And I think you do a great job of that with your writing and the stories that you're telling.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's an interesting project for you to take on. I think that's really great, right? It's like you can just pass a link on to your kids and tell them, your dad was like this, or your family thought this of you. That's really great. I like that mission.
Yeah, is that one of the things that you kind of learn from the thing is like, whoa, my dad was way cooler than I thought he was, or I just thought of him as boring old dad that made me do stuff, and actually he had a life and adventures too.
Yeah, I mean, especially when someone is no longer in your life, you're allowed to spin all these tales about them, right? And for me, it is really comforting to think of him as this kind of very bold figure, very loving and very fierce and strong type of dad. And it just kind of helps me remember the really good memories and the type of love he gave me when he was alive. So I'm happy to have this memorial to him. We received one of the big kind of basketball fan moments. We received a letter from Adam Silver, who's like the commissioner of the NBA. Wait, I don't know if that's right. Something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And it's just on our fridge. And when I received the letter, I don't really know basketball, and they kind of texted my friends like, hey, this guy just sent me a letter from the NBA. And they're like, oh my God, that's so cool, that kind of stuff. And there's so many moments like these that are happening that I just can't fully appreciate because of who I am and what kind of interests I have. So it would be nice if you was here to kind of, obsess over it in a way that I couldn't, that I can't. So.
I feel like this is like almost it's like a buddy comedy, like a movie. Like your dad and Charles were like kindred spirits, like how did they come together the way they did? It's really just serendipity and random, and it like has allowed you to share his story and share his life. So it seems like there was a reason behind it.
Yeah, I mean, when you hear this story too, Charles kind of talks about, and my dad, they both kind of talk about something that they found in common, which was that they both are people of color growing up in the U.S. So for my dad, that was kind of an immigrant experience. He came here, going to graduate school with already that background, but he feels like he achieved a sort of American dream. He came here with not much money in his pocket, but a lot of like cultural capital, being able to go to grad school and whatnot, and feels that he's established a pretty good home and a stable family in Iowa. Whereas, Charles, he also feels like he kind of pulled himself up by his bootstraps. He grew up very low income in Alabama, and basketball was really what launched him into this kind of like huge stardom. So they both really felt like they had come to America and really fulfilled something very grand, something very beyond them, something that they were supposed to do in this kind of place. And so, I have different opinions about how that kind of all works out, but they really believed in that as people as men of their generation, I think, and they talked about that a lot, about what people could do to lift themselves up as well.
Shirley, I really appreciate you being on here and telling your story and paying a real tribute to your dad. I know he'd be proud.
Yeah, for all the dads out there, huh? Nudge your kids and tell them, why don't you ask me more questions? Something like that.
That is big, right? Is that could be a message that you could bring out, learn about your dads and their stories as well.
Yeah, I think definitely take any chance you get to sit your folks down, sit any caretaker or guardian in your life down and just ask them questions about, their favorite stories and their memories, because people can really surprise you with them.
Yes, very good. I appreciate it, Shirley, and thank you for being on the Dad the Best I Can show. Where can people learn more about where to find you and your writing and everything?
They can follow me on Twitter at ShirleySherylW, or have a website, shirleywang.myportfolio.com.
Awesome, Shirley. Thank you for being on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for listening to the Dad the Best I Can show. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Actually, 5 stars, we could do better than that. Brooks? Infinity stars. Cameron, how many stars?
Infinity 1,000.
Infinity 1,000. You gotta one-up them in this household. Thanks. See ya.